Welcome to the KSSP podcast. I'm Katie.
And I'm Spencer.
And today we're going to be talking about how the neurodiverse brain works. And we are going to start with a video from King's College London called Neurobiology Animation. Let's get started.
Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, or ADHD as it's commonly known, affects about 1 in 20 young people around the world. It can have a major impact on life at home, in school, and with friends. Symptoms of inattention, impulsivity, and hyperactivity can reduce a person's ability to control their actions and concentrate without getting distracted. Some people have expressed skepticism about the disorder, but brain imaging has shown that symptoms of ADHD are associated with a series of abnormalities in the development and function of parts of the brain. Let's look first at the cortex, the brain's surface layer. In normal development, the cortex, which plays key roles in memory, attention, thought, and language, gradually increases in thickness before reaching a peak during teenage years. Scans have shown that in children with ADHD, the cortex generally develops more slowly, particularly in frontal and temporal lobe regions, which are important for memory and controlling behavior. Typically, the frontal cortex, along with other major parts of the brain, are smaller in children with ADHD than in those without. These different parts of the brain do not operate in isolation, but interact extensively to form networks controlling functions such as language, attention, and movement. The activity of different networks increases and decreases to allow different functions to take place. For example, while you are watching this video, activity in networks involved in processing information will have typically increased, while activity in networks involved in mind wandering will have typically decreased. In a person with ADHD, the activity of these networks is impaired, and connections within the networks are disrupted. And when we look more closely at the communication between these networks, there is also disruption in the release of the chemicals dopamine and noradrenaline, which are responsible for relaying messages between brain cells. Overall, when children with ADHD carry out particular tasks, some networks are not switched on enough, while others remain switched on too much. Research from around the world has shown widespread differences in the development and function of the brain in children with ADHD. While we can't yet use brain imaging to diagnose the disorder, the more we can learn about ADHD in the brain, the better we can understand the symptoms that children with ADHD experience in everyday life, and the more we'll be able to do to support them.
One part of ADHD, as far as dopamine release goes, one huge problem a lot of people have that goes overlooked would be executive dysfunction. And that is basically when the brain is not releasing enough dopamine to motivate someone to complete a task. So, for example, getting your laundry done. Your brain is not releasing enough dopamine to motivate you to do every single step to get your laundry done, like picking up the clothes and organizing them by color, and it just becomes very overwhelming for someone with an ADHD brain because there's so many different aspects of the task that you're thinking about. All those areas in your brain are lighting up. You get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, it's for someone like, let's say, a friend of mine who doesn't have ADHD. How I perceive it is that they don't necessarily think of the task of, like, they obviously have to think of the task of doing laundry to do it, but they don't necessarily think about every step involved in the process. So then their brain isn't having to does obviously process, because no matter what, we all have to, and we may do laundry differently, but at the end of the day, it's about the same process. We still have to get it into the washer, dryer,
yeah,
and then hang them up or I mean, you don't have to hang them up, but generally we go through the same process. But I think, and I don't know why it happens, but it's just thinking about, and for me, sometimes it comes down to time, which also can be, I think, a big ADHD deterrence issue, because I feel like, although, and even for something as simple as, like, I struggled with brushing my teeth, especially during COVID. So for something as simple as that, in my head, of course, it makes sense. It's only 3 minutes, but actually doing it, that's a long ass 3 minutes.
Yeah, I can.
And I don't know why. It shouldn't be, but it is. My brain cannot sit there.
Yeah.
Like I've started, a lot of times I'll play music, just something else to stimulate my brain. Cause not that these activities, I don't think they give anyone dopamine per se, but it's just hard. I don't understand. Like, I know we just watched a video, but it's hard, cause I think it's also hard to always pin it down to any specific structure or neurochemical in my, like, we definitely have a decent understanding of the ADHD brain, I would say, but I wouldn't ever want to say we understand everything about it personally.
I would say, like, the executive dysfunction, definitely would call it a mental paralysis from my experience. Like, that's how I describe it to someone who has never experienced it before. You feel motivated to do the task, but you feel mentally paralyzed almost. Like, your mind is stopping you from completing the task because, like, it's too boring, basically. Or, like, because it's either too boring or too overwhelming. I think that's what he was saying when, like, different parts of the brain don't fire correctly. Like, the connections made aren't, I don't want to say correct, 'cause that's the wrong word, but, like, not normal. And they're not compartmentalized properly.
I think that's kind of what, and it's, and I don't know if we can, it's probably, like, it's hard, obviously, again, to make any generalization, even, because the only way to ever know 100% first, I mean, yes, we can do research studies and make pretty accurate generalization, but the only way you would ever know 1000% for sure is if we could study every single person's brain and see every single difference, but we don't have the technology to do that as far as I know. But I do think that it obviously shows that there is some sort of I don't know if I would call it like a miscommunication, because at the end of the day we can all we know the tasks that we probably should do, so it's not like we don't, I mean, sometimes you may not always know necessarily, but generally, like, brushing your teeth, I would say showering, doing laundry, like, everybody knows to do those. It's not like you don't necessarily know to do them, but it's just very interesting how someone who doesn't have any mental illness because obviously any of those can be affected by any mental illness, but specifically with ADHD, how it's hard to do those simple tasks. Like, even for me, sometimes making, like, doctor appointments is still, because I know it's not the whole day, but in my head, when I make a doctor's appointment, that is my whole day.
Definitely.
Even if the appointment's at 2 p.m. and I wake up at 8, like, I'm getting better at that. And medication probably helps with that too. But before, I would spend the whole day, if I woke up at 8 a.m. and it wasn't until 2, I would always be like, okay, so I have to shower at this time so that I can get changed at this time, so that I can leave my house at this time, so I can arrive at this time to be 15 minutes early so that I can do the check. Like, and I would just constantly, like, check the clock, like, okay, it's not time to shower yet. And, like, yes, I could have set an alarm, but it's still, like, the fact that even if I set an alarm, my brain would still be feeling like that.
The time blindness in general is an interesting concept that I wish they would do more studies on with people with ADHD. Like, what is it about the ADHD brain that, gives us time blindness? Because that would be really important to understand our perception of time.
Yeah.
Let me see. I wonder if they've done that.
Yeah, I was like, they probably have some information about it, but it definitely is something that is common, I would say, among people with ADHD. And then maybe just ways to, I guess for me, I had to, in a way, change my mindset / frame of mind, how I see it in a way. Like, I had to tell myself basically it takes myself reminding myself that, like, whenever I have an appointment, I still feel a little, that little stress time blindness. But for the most part, I tell myself that and I also think it's kind of like what for you maybe causes the time blindness. Like, for me, some of it might have been anxiety just about if I were to be late or something, or I don't know. I think it's important to understand, like, why too, which is kind of what I think you were trying to see if they know.
The basal ganglia is what correlates with time perception. So the timekeeping functions are controlled by the basal ganglia, the right parietal cortex, and dopaminergic pathways.
But yeah, I think I think it's just something, even with medication, that I don't like to label things, like, I don't like to label things, but I don't like to label things as, like, bad. Because if you have the perception that this is a bad thing, it is a part of us. So, because if you see it as something you need to change, I just feel like that makes you feel like there's something wrong with you, rather than if you try to frame it in the way that this is how I am, so how can I work with this and make it work for me, rather than being like, I need to change this about myself. I like to think of it as, how can I utilize this for me to make it work for me, if that
and
makes
that's
sense.
something I've been learning recently. I've started seeing an ADHD coach, and she has been helping me to realize that an ADHD coach is a great tool if you're able to have access to one, and if you like really need help with your symptoms.
Yeah, I don't know if they have any near me, but because I think
Yeah.
there's online websites though that you can use to find resources. But yeah, so for me, it's all about, because I feel like when we frame the narrative that again, not necessarily all, I'm not talking about all habits, but habits, if you frame them as bad, then in your mind, because I like the narrative more so of learning. And again, I'm not speaking for every situation or every person. This is more kind of what I've been learning, and if it works for you guys, makes sense, then you can also utilize it. But more so learning that who I am is not wrong. Just because I may do things differently than other people, I may have habits that are different than other people, whatever it could be, that doesn't make me wrong. And it's not, some things, if you do want to change about yourself, that's great. Change is good. Growth is good. But some of these things are also things that really I don't know if we can change. So trying to live with that mindset that I need to change this about myself when you cannot change it isn't healthy either. But I do think it's important to, like you said, reach out to an ADHD coach or a psychiatrist, therapist, because while my methods may work for me, that they're not going to work for everyone. I do not claim that at all. So I don't want anyone to just do something because someone on the internet said to, So you should definitely still reach out to those services if you have access to them. But I do like to share, we like to share our experience. Then if anything seems helpful, then that's awesome. But otherwise, that's okay too. If nothing seems helpful, if it doesn't work for you, then that's fine, because we're all a little bit different. Every path is going to be different.
I personally love sticky notes, because with ADHD, if something is out of sight, it is out of mind. And having a sticky note that just tells me the information I need to remember it just works great for me. That's just me personally, but they help me a lot.
I have sticky notes, but I don't use them. I bought them with the intent of using them, but then I never got into it. I mean, I do sometimes, but yeah. One of the biggest issues that I've had is, and this is just my experience, but there's all those types of planners that, this planner is made for the ADHD mind, or this routine is made for the ADHD mind. So I'm like, okay, I'll give it a try, but then it doesn't work. So a lot of whatever works for us may not work for you. And that's why I think it's really important on finding what works for you rather than trying to fit. Because I'm not going to say those planners don't work for others, but they did not work for me at all, because I could not get into them. But if those work for you, then that's amazing. So it's all about finding what works for you, which is also can be difficult, because there probably are definitely some scammers who are going to be like, this is perfect for the insert mental illness here brain, so you should buy this, spend your money on this. So there are definitely, I think you should I probably should have thought about it more before, but I think impulsiveness is also part of it, because I was like, this is going to fix me, I'm going to buy it right now. And who cares? But I should have definitely been like, am I actually going to use this? Is this actually is this something that I could use? And I probably would have said no. But at least I learned that those methods don't work for me too. So I'd like to take a learning experience from it rather than being regretted or upset about it. But that's just
it's good to have that mindset, especially when we make mistakes. It's not a waste if you can learn from it.
Agreed. Because otherwise, how do you learn, really? I mean, I'm not saying go out and try to make mistakes, but that's just a part of life. I mean, we should live our lives and then learn from mistakes, but don't hate yourself because you made a mistake, because that's not gonna help you grow either. Because another thing that I think can be a struggle with ADHD is, for me, I feel very multi-passionate. So instead of trying to lock myself into one thing, one hobby, what I've been trying, and that's kind of also what I feel like Fridays are for on the podcast, but just in general, I like to kind of expand my hobbies and try new things. Because before, I always felt like, oh, you have to find what you like now you're getting old, you should have already figured this stuff out. But there's no timeline for anyone. We can figure things out when we're 80 if we need to. So for me, it's just important that I am trying new things. Like, I've tried painting, and then you saw last Friday, if you watched, we did some story, tried to write so just trying new things. And then I also think that really helps if you are able to have a couple of different hobbies, because then you have options. And I mean, could be for everyone. This doesn't have to be specifically it's just like for me, that way I have a bunch of different options for things to do rather than, let's say, I don't know, watching TV. But if you do that every single day, like if you only have one hobby, eventually it's going to get, and maybe not for everyone. Again, for me, I would not be able to do one thing over and over and over every single day. Like, I kind of need the variety in a sense, and that's not wrong. Like, I feel like I used to see that as a bad thing, because why couldn't I? Like, some people can have one job that they do for their whole life and they love it, and some people have one hobby that they're able to do for their whole life and they love it. And then in my head, I was like, well, why not me? Like, what is wrong with me that doesn't allow me to be like that? But there's nothing wrong with me. It's just that I have to learn to live my life, with my brain, I guess, if you will. So I think it's important you got to do what's best for you at the end of the day, is what I always feel. As long as it's not hurting anyone else, obviously, and being safe too. But it is important to kind of think about yourself and, in a way, be selfish, but not. Like, you just got to take care of yourself, because you can't take care of others if you aren't taking care of yourself either. So that's important.
Yeah, and I think one part of, at least for me with my ADHD, that I would say is positive is I work much better under a very busy, high pressure environment than a very slow paced, low pressure environment. My brain works a lot better when there's a lot going on and the stakes are high.
I think for me, I thought that would be what I liked, but then obviously in nursing that was but I think nursing is a little more stressful just in general. And with nursing, it was hard because it wasn't always something to do. Yeah, and COVID, but it wasn't always something to do, but then sometimes felt like there was too much to do. So there was really no medium. And maybe not everyone experiences that, but that was my experience. But I do like to keep busy, because I don't like not doing anything, if that makes sense. So I do get where you're coming from, because I mean, if we take off here, then this will keep us busy, which will be nice, because it'll be something that we enjoy keeping us busy, if that makes sense. Yes. So that will be nice. But having a job where you're not doing too much is kind of but some people do like that, and that is fine too. It's finding what works for you and not comparing yourself to what works for others, because we're all different. Even if, we're all humans and we should all respect each other, but we're all going to have different life paths.
Yeah, we need people to do, some low pace, low action jobs where it's a very slow pace. It's not like no one can do those jobs. And if people enjoy it, then that's great.
Yeah, although they should be paid a livable wage. But if there's nothing wrong with someone who wants to work at McDonald's.
Job too, though.
But that's,
I have to say, McDonald's is a pretty fast-paced job, though. I would have to say.
But if someone likes that, or I guess an office job then too.
Just sitting at a desk waiting for phone calls.
Yeah. You really just have to find what you like in life, because you don't necessarily have to, because I know there's always been the impression that, if you don't love your job, then you won't love your life. But I don't think you necessarily have to love your job, but I do think you have to at least enjoy it to an extent. It doesn't have to be your passion per se, in my opinion. Personally, I could turn my passion into some sort of career. That's my dream. But I also understand that some people just want to a job that they enjoy, but it's not necessarily a passion of theirs. Or at least
and
I feel
think
like people
that's
might
great. Not everyone needs to
feel that
have a
way.
career in their passion as long as they have time to experience their passion.
Yeah,
And
yes. Because finding your
Yes.
passion is important though still. But I don't think it has to be your career either. Like if you just enjoy working this office 9 to 5 and that gives you time, like vacation time and time off to live the rest of your life, then that's great. Like, although I don't know how easy that is to find in our society right now, but we can make it, right, guys? We can change things for all of us for the better. But I also think another big thing, and this is more so what I don't even know if this was necessarily an ADHD thing, but just struggling with, I mean, it's partly, I guess you could factor it in, but just knowing that I can't compare where I'm at to others, where others are at in life too.
Yeah.
But I think that's for everyone, like, because it's always easy to, and I mean, you could even say that with like the beauty standard, like looking at people and then comparing yourself. Like you shouldn't do that, obviously. And that's easier said than done, but it's just kind of
reframing your thing.
And I mean, maybe that means spending more time with yourself, whether that's journaling or whatever that is to you, compared to scrolling on Instagram or TikTok, where you're going to see these people that then you will compare yourself to. And knowing that where you are at in life is okay. Like I like to believe that we will find success in our life. I like to believe that. And maybe that's too optimistic, but I like to believe that we will get to where we're going, where we're supposed to be. The road may not seem clear, and that's okay. We don't need to know. Like, that's part of the journey. That's part of the experience, is just living it, not knowing where it's going to lead, in my opinion, and just living the experience. Whether, like, good, bad, it's, I don't really think there is good and bad, but it's only, it's all perception too. So, but I don't know. There's probably a million other things but I think that's all on ADHD that I have to say.
Yeah, I think,
But but if you guys have anything you ever want us again to talk about, Thursdays we like to do more science. So, I mean, that can be physics, chemistry, neuro, just we like to learn. So you let us know what you want us to look into, learn about, and talk about with you guys, and we will do that. And you can leave us a comment here if you want, letting us know.
Yeah, you can leave us a comment on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, or YouTube.
So yes, join us. We'll see you guys next Thursday when I don't know what we're going to talk about, but we will see you then.